Thank you, Mark. Our next writer, his name is Patrick Shannon. He's a writer and a blogger who has published under a pseudonym. Life has seen to it that he has the next year available for full-time writing, and his Waterline fans are looking forward to seeing what happens. He lives in St. Charles with his wife and 2 children. Patrick, please come on up.
That was Ann's nice way of saying that I just got laid off last week. So if anybody's hiring, come on up and see me. In 1974, a 20-year-old friend of mine ran off to Cairo, Egypt with a woman that was 20 years older than him. And in 1976, she fell in love with a gay guy, and he ran away to escape her to New York, and she knew she could change him, so she ran after him. And that year, I happened to drop in without him knowing. He didn't get any of my letters, and I spent the summer of '76 in Cairo. So these are sketches from Cairo, 1976. The great barometer of war in Cairo was the King Tut exhibit. Normally, it was displayed on the 2nd floor of the Egyptian Museum. If it was moved to the 1st floor, people started looking up at the sky whenever they went outside. If it was moved to the basement, the kids were sent off to stay in the country. Alice was a rather homely, horse-faced woman who all the men desired because she seemed to be the only American woman in Cairo. She didn't care, and she cut no one any slack. This was part of her high-ass feminist persona, along with chain-smoking camels from packs that she would first bang into submission on the palm of her hand. When I met her, her cigarette-smoking wrist had a cast on it, and she had bruises on her face. These were marks of honor to her. She had some sort of minor job for one of the American press groups, and she tended to work late. Her Arabic was pretty good, and she would sometimes use this Arabic to lecture tram cars full of Egyptian workers who were sleepily returning home after a hard day about the rights of women. They usually just ignored her, but recently some disgruntled worker had gotten up off his seat, punched her in the mouth, and thrown her off the moving train. Fortunately, it was only moving a few miles an hour. She was in obvious pain, but seemed pretty delighted about the experience. Whenever I saw her, I didn't want her to leave, but I also couldn't wait for her to go. Abu Bakr was one of those Americans who had gone native in a thorough way that only the son of a rich man could. In his former life as an American suburban kid, he had been a member of a famous chemical industry dynasty. Somehow he had gone to Cairo on a lark and liked it so much that he'd grown a reddish blonde beard and converted to Islam. He was the only American around who dressed like an Egyptian peasant in a galabeah and skullcap. He believed that he was a Sufi, and maybe he was, but more than that, he was a notoriously tight-fisted mooch. Whenever he dropped in, he would try to touch us for money, cigarettes, soap, or pretty much anything he saw lying around. My friend Ken, with whom I was staying, said that Abu Bakr was rather strict in his Muslim observances, but I noticed that Ken hid the hashish and booze whenever Abu Bakr was coming over. Abu Bakr was tolerated by the Egyptian Muslims because he was one himself, and was also disliked because he was such a good one. A juice store in Cairo. There are large stained ceramic floor tiles. The left counter has a man who squeezes fresh orange juice from a massive pile of oranges. Straight ahead is a man with a hand-crank machine that can chew a 4-foot pole of sugar cane down to one tall glass of debris-spotted nectar. To the right, along the wall, is a row of chipped marble-top tables with iron chairs like an old ice cream parlor. Above on the high ceilings are large ceiling fans circling slowly like buzzards, waiting. The men behind the counter are perfectly still in the heat until they receive a drink order. Then they make the juice extremely quickly and efficiently so they can get it over with and lapse back into the cooler stillness. The drinks are room temperature, but are quite quenching and fortifying on a hot day, giving one just about enough strength to stagger down the block to the next juice stop that this time might sell a glass of pulverized strawberries or carrots. And this is how we make our way through the city in the noonday sun when it is hot enough for us to leave shallow footmarks in the tar in the street. American boys who spent any amount of time in Cairo would often get carried away and try something silly. Some would convert to Islam for a while and walk around the streets wearing galabeas and skull caps while smoking camels and looking for hashish. Others might want to go shirtless and wear cut-off shorts and a tourist souvenir Arab headdress like they had just spent the months digging on the Suez Canal. And one Anglophile even decided to wear a fez one evening while out with some American friends. God knows where he found one, but it was a red Shriner sort of thing with a tassel, fortunately without the name of a lodge on it. He and his two friends went into a tea shop to get a glass of tea. The proprietor decided to play along, searching in the dark places in the backs of his cupboards until he came up with an ancient china teacup and saucer for the man with the fez. Ostentatiously, but politely, he blew the dust out of it before he poured that one special. I have come back from an antique shop with a load of souvenirs for my friends and family back in the States. I'm proud of myself that I did this shopping alone, even managing to get a cup of Turkish coffee out of the proprietor, something I had read about but had never actually experienced before. The proprietor charged me 40 Egyptian pounds for the stuff, which seems fair to me, but I only have a 20 on me. I offer to leave the stuff there while I go back to get another 20, but the proprietor begins to argue with me, insisting that I give him the 20 that I had and then come back later and pay the rest. When I got home, my friend Ken was there, and to his astonishment, I got another 20 out of the drawer and headed out again. "Are you out of your freaking mind?" he said. Ken had strong feelings about money, and I had seen him create an embarrassing scene of handing back 2 open Cokes to a street vendor when he thought he had been overcharged 2 piastres. "You're done," he yelled. "He let you walk off with the stuff." But I would not be convinced, and fierce was the look of disappointment Ken gave me when I walked out the door. Fierce was also the utter astonishment of the proprietor of the antique shop, who burst into tears when he saw me walking through the door with a 20-pound note in my hand. "You came back," he said with awe, and when I handed him the note, he actually kissed my hands. I felt honored and like a total sucker at the same time. A very wide intersection. The streets are crowded with madly driving buses and cars, and the sidewalks are crowded with people. To keep people from falling into the intersection or crossing through this traffic, the corners are fenced off with a railing. But people in typical Egyptian style just ignore them. Across the street, I see a taxicab explode in a shower of ice. But it's not ice, it's glass. A street urchin has hopped the barrier and has immediately been struck by a speeding taxi. The boy has flown in through the windshield and out the back window. Time and traffic stops. Some passers-by pick up the limp body. The boy is obviously dead with all of his bones broken. A low roar escapes from the crowd on the street. Rough men pry open the doors of the cab, pull out the shocked and dazed cab driver, and begin to beat him. It is night in Cairo, and 5 of us are speeding on the road out to the desert and the pyramids for one of our drinking sessions. There's almost no traffic. In Khalid, the driver can open his little Renault out to 80 miles per hour. Everyone in the car, except for me, seems loudly and deliriously happy, and for a while we race neck and neck with another car full of happy young men, windows down, screaming good-natured insults at each other. While I am not loudly and deliciously happy, being too sick and stoned to exert much energy from my cocoon in the back seat behind Khalid, I feel strangely at peace, and not just because of the brandy and the hashish. It seems so exotic to be here. I'm such a Catholic boy. And yet it also seems so right to be in this place at this time. I am not caught up in the energy, but I am somehow fully there. The car radio is blaring Arab love songs, and suddenly it switches to a new one. "Ah, Mr. Patrick," yells Khalid. "A perfect song for a perfect moment." And not taking his foot off the gas for even a second, he translates for me, turning around to look directly at me at each stanza. "Oh, my darling, though we may live and laugh, love or die, remember, everything is the will of Allah."